I bought a quiet mountain cabin. Then the HOA stormed in demanding my land. They had no idea who I was or what I was about to uncover. The last moving box had barely left my truck before a sharp knock echoed through my new mountain cabin. Still in my dusty work boots and jeans, I opened the door to a formidable trio. The woman in front, Brenda, was a force. Her arms crossed, visor low, sunglasses stark, and a clipboard clutched like a weapon. Without a greeting, she barked, "You can't park your truck on that slope." I blinked, genuinely taken aback. "Good afternoon to you too," I managed. Then she cut me off. "I'm Brenda Davies, president of the Ridgewood Pines HOA, and that slope is common land. Your truck is on HOA property." My Chevy was just off the gravel, barely kissing the grass. Behind Brenda, a guy with a Bluetooth headset and another woman already snapping photos, nodded in chilling unison, like a choreographed intimidation act. Brenda wasn't finished. "Your cabin violates several aesthetic codes. The roof color isn't approved. Your porch swing is the wrong style, and there's no record of this structure being registered." I couldn't help but laugh. "Lady, this cabin has stood here for 30 years. Then it was built illegally," she snapped, her voice rising. "We need land usage documents and that swing removed immediately. Fail to comply by Friday and we'll issue formal violations and fines." Leaning against the doorframe, I crossed my arms, mirroring her stance. "Are you absolutely sure you want to do this?" Her eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" I held her gaze. "You're trespassing, Brenda, and you're trying to claim land that isn't yours. You're going to look incredibly foolish when this backfires." "Is that a threat?" she shrieked. "No," I replied, a calm smile playing on my lips. "It's a spoiler." She jabbed her pen at me. "You'll be hearing from us." With that, Brenda and her mini militia marched off, seemingly victorious. I watched them go, then closed the door, a different kind of smile forming as I walked to the kitchen table. My lease packets sat in a cardboard box, waiting. I pulled out the papers for Ridgewood Pines Holdings LLC. My name, Ethan O'Connell, was right there. I hadn't just bought a cabin. I'd bought the entire development. Brenda and her ridiculous HOA, they were squatting on my land. As the welcoming committee vanished down the dirt road, I was already opening a folder. Historical survey maps, Ridgewood County. This cabin was a treasure chest of history, with documents spanning 5 decades, blueprints, land parcels, even old letters between developers and the state zoning office. 6 months of quiet research and legal battles had allowed me to acquire the dissolving land trust that owned the undeveloped lots and common areas. Clearly, no one had bothered to tell the HOA. Property lines had shifted after a timber company's bankruptcy, and the board probably just assumed everything within the neighborhood signs was theirs. But paper doesn't lie, and neither do satellite images. I pulled up a GIS map, overlaying survey data. That common land Brenda claimed, clearly within my parcel, and those HOA maintained trails cutting right across my private land, and others too. I made a mental note to address those later. Bright and early the next morning, I drove into town. The Ridgewood County Recorder's office, nestled between a bakery and an antique shop, still smelled of old paper and ink. I introduced myself to the clerk, an older gentleman in flannel. His eyebrows shot up when he saw my last name. "You related to the O'Connell who bought the Ridgewood parcels?" he asked. "That'd be me," I confirmed, sliding over my ID and the transfer certificate. He let out a low whistle. "Well, I'll be. You're about to stir things up." "Already started," I chuckled. "I just need certified copies of the parcel boundaries, quick claim deeds, and the zoning variance granted in '92 for the upper ridge." He gave me a knowing look. "They've been pretending that variance doesn't exist for years." I left with a manila envelope so thick it could have been a doorstop. Returning home, a pale yellow notice was taped to my door, printed in bold blocky font, "Mandatory compliance notice." 3 pages of absurd violations, from my roof color to my non-conforming architectural character, culminating in a $400 fine due in 72 hours. I didn't even bother reading past the demand for payment. Instead, I walked to the utility pole, opened the weatherproof lockbox, and unscrewed the metal plate, revealing the etched parcel number. Just as expected, I snapped a photo. Then I made 3 crucial calls, one to the county assessor for a site inspection, one to the Ridgewood Sheriff's Department to report harassment. This was the second time they'd made false land claims. And finally to Raquel Price, my land use attorney. Raquel was legendary. She could bring a grown man to tears just by reciting legal codes. "They're issuing fines for violations on land they don't own," she exclaimed, when I explained. "Precisely, and trying to enforce aesthetic codes on a structure older than their HOA charter." I heard her furious typing. "Ethan, that's textbook overreach. I'll draft a cease and desist this afternoon." While Raquel worked her magic, I installed trail cameras along my tree line, not just for footage, but because I had a gut feeling, and I was right. That evening, just after dusk, I saw headlights flicker. Two hooded figures emerged from a white SUV, heading straight for my shed. They never saw the silent red infrared blink of the motion-triggered camera. The next morning, my padlock was broken, and a crude orange spray-painted, not HOA compliant, defaced my shed. Furious, I printed the photos and drove straight to the sheriff's office. Deputy Mara Torres shook her head, her face grim. "That's felony vandalism and trespassing. Are you pressing charges?" "I want to file a report first, but absolutely, I'll press charges once we identify them." She leaned back. "Let me guess, Ridgewood Pines HOA. I have strong reasons to believe so." One had their logo on his hoodie. Mara sighed. "That group has been pushing boundaries for years. No one's ever stood up to them." "Well," I stated, "that's about to change." I handed her copies of my deed, parcel boundaries, and the time-stamped security footage. She promised a patrol would come for photos and fingerprints. Back at the cabin, another note was pinned to my fence. "Una thoroughside structure must be removed immediately. Final notice." This one was signed, Brenda Davies, HOA President. I photographed it, adding it to my growing evidence, Ridgewood Pines HOA file. Raquel called that afternoon. "Ethan, the cease and desist is ready." And I found something else. They filed as a nonprofit, but never registered their enforcement authority with the state. They can't legally impose fines at all. I burst out laughing. "You're telling me they've been bluffing this whole time?" "Not just bluffing," she corrected, her voice serious. "Committing fraud, collecting money under false legal pretenses, is a serious offense. I'm drafting a complaint to the state attorney general's office." That evening, armed with a folding chair, a thermos of coffee and my clipboard, I hiked to the Ridge Trail. I set up above the HOA's community garden, which my map showed was squarely on land and never deeded to them. It was technically unclaimed, until I hammered in a small wooden sign, "Private property, trespassers will be prosecuted." I took a photo of the sign in front of the garden, attaching a copy of my deed. It was time to push back. Raquel sent the final cease and desist. The next morning, I printed 5 copies and hand-delivered one to Brenda's porch. She was watering petunias, her face draining of color when she saw me. "You can't just," she started. I cut her off, holding up the envelope. "You've been served. This is a legal cease and desist, effective immediately. Stop issuing fines, harassment notices, and asserting authority you don't possess." She snatched it, tearing it open, her eyes darting across the first page as her mouth opened and closed. Speechless, I continued, my voice steady. "You've also been reported to the sheriff's office for vandalism and trespassing. I have security footage. I strongly suggest you advise your board to hire counsel." This is outrageous," she stammered, finally finding her voice. "We've maintained order here for over 20 years. I stepped off her porch. "You've maintained delusions, Brenda. That ends now." As I walked back, I passed the Bluetooth guy. He was adjusting a flag, pointedly avoiding my gaze. "Morning," I said. He nodded stiffly. "Heard you're stirring up trouble." "I prefer the word truth," I replied, and kept walking. By my front steps, 2 neighbors approached me quietly, William Bill Jensen, a retired park ranger, and Linda Rodriguez, a local plumber. Both had questions, and both had their own stories of the board's threats, fines, and intimidation. I listened, taking notes. This wasn't just about my cabin anymore. It was about the entire neighborhood. The following Monday, a white SUV with the Ridgewood County seal pulled up. Inspector Delaney, the site assessor I'd requested, emerged. Tan slacks, nylon windbreaker, a laser rangefinder, and a no-nonsense expression. "Got your parcel maps, Mr. O'Connell," he said. unsnapping his clipboard. Let's confirm what's yours before someone else tries to play sheriff. We walked the perimeter, his boots sinking into the leaf mulch, where the HOA had laid gravel for their nature trail. He paused at the garden, eyeing the faded benches. This area's been used, but I see no registered easement or lease, he muttered. Because there isn't one, I confirmed. They've been using it without permission, he frowned. That's encroachment. Time to file a land use complaint. Rounding the property's edge, Delaney pointed to a solar streetlight drilled into a boulder near a trailhead. See that often? I asked. He examined it. Not without a permit. This isn't county installed. I took a photo. Unauthorized electrical work on private land that... Yep, he scribbled. And sloppy. Wiring's exposed. I handed him a drive with my parcel overlays and HOA installation timestamps. He nodded, promising his report by week's end. By late afternoon, I had enough documentation to make a courthouse gavel hesitate mid-swing. Raquel had filed the cease and desist, but now we were entering serious legal territory. That evening, Bill and Linda joined me on the porch for coffee. Bill brought a thick folder of emails and photos. Linda, a certified mail envelope. Bill leaned forward. 2 years ago, they threatened my fire road access because I wouldn't let them dig a ditch. Said shared responsibility. I asked for title authority. Never heard back. Then just found the ditch dug anyway. No notice. Linda shook her head. They fined me for commercial vehicle parking because of my van's logo. I appealed. They denied it, but I never even got a hearing. They just kept adding late fees. Did you ever pay? I asked. Her face hardened. No, I filed a complaint with the state licensing board, but never heard back. I swear Brenda has someone inside that department. Things just disappear. I tapped my pen. Are you both willing to go on record? Bill nodded slowly. You bet. I've been waiting for the right time. Linda added, if someone's finally holding them accountable, I'll talk. The next morning, Raquel's email arrived. The state attorney general's office had opened a preliminary investigation. Our complaint had teeth, detailing not just fake fines and forged authority, but unauthorized financial activity. The HOA had been funneling dues into a private account under Brenda's husband's name. Raquel traced the EIN to a defunct landscaping company. This was getting serious. Later that day, 2 unmarked sedans glided into Ridgewood Pines, parking by the community sign. 4 men and women in plain suits emerged. One clipped a badge to his belt as they approached the HOA's community relations office. A glorified shed. From the ridge, I watched through binoculars. Within minutes, they entered. 10 minutes later, Brenda was escorted out, handcuffed and crimson-faced. Her husband followed, dazed, muttering about a misunderstanding. By dusk, the entire board had either resigned or was under formal investigation. The county issued a temporary administrative hold on all HOA functions, but I wasn't finished. I called Mark, a private auditor I'd used before, known for finding discrepancies buried deep enough to need a backhoe. I sent him everything. 3 days later, Mark called. Ethan, they've been double booking maintenance charges, charging residents for services never rendered, then claiming the same costs as expenses to a defunct LLC. That's wire fraud. Can you prove it? I've already drafted a summary, he continued. This goes beyond state jurisdiction. You're looking at federal exposure. That night I printed the summary, sealed it, and dropped it at the county prosecutor's office. No grand spectacle needed. The facts would speak for themselves. The next week, Ridgewood Pines was eerily quiet. No more patrols, no clipboard tyrants, just neighbors tending gardens, walking dogs, offering nods that spoke volumes. Relief. Thursday, a letter from Ridgewood County Court. HOA's operating license suspended, fines frozen, accounts seized. Raquel called, her voice lighter than I'd ever heard it. You just dismantled a fraudulent HOA in under 3 weeks. That might be a record. I had help, I said. And a lot of patience, she laughed. Well, you've made the news. The local paper's running a story tomorrow. Landlord who turned the table. I glanced out the window at the ridge trail where my wooden sign still stood by the abandoned garden. Beside it now, a small bouquet of flowers in a mason jar, with a note, about time. I didn't know who left it, nor did I need to. What mattered was clear. Ridgewood Pines was no longer under siege. It was finally mine to protect. The sun dipped behind the ridgeline. As I parked by the old logging road, Mark had called earlier, tracing a Shell landscaping company to a hidden account, a P.O. box in another county. What he sent wasn't a spreadsheet. It was a bombshell. Payments for fire mitigation contracts, stretched back 5 years. Suspiciously round sums, paid quarterly. The problem? Ridgewood Pines had failed to meet fire break standards 3 summers in a row, according to the Forestry Service. I drove to where the HOA claimed to have installed a fire break. A tangled mess of dry brush and rusted tools lay rotting. No cleared trail, no access road, not even a fire ring. I took geotagged photos from every angle, then drove straight to the Ridgewood County Emergency Management Office. Inside, Carly, a woman in a navy blazer and hiking boots, frowned at my pictures. That's supposed to be cleared every spring. We've sent warnings. They told us they hired a contractor. They did, I replied, setting down the folder. Only the contractor doesn't exist. And neither does the work. Her expression darkened as she flipped through the pages. If they claimed mitigation was done, and we have reports proving otherwise, that's falsifying public safety documentation, which means I need to call the fire marshal and the state's Department of Natural Resources. This just became criminal. I left with a sinking feeling that quickly hardened into resolve. Fraud was one thing. Endangering lives to line your pockets was an entirely different, unforgivable level. By morning, Ridgewood Pines was swarming with inspectors. State vehicles lined the main road. Uniformed officials walked the trails, clipboards and GPS devices in hand. A fire marshal shook his head at the mitigation zone, near Lot 9. This place is a matchstick waiting for a breeze, he muttered. The community buzzed with questions. Residents gathered on porches, whispering, their tones sharpening with each passing hour. That afternoon, Special Agent Miller from the State Attorney General's office called. He wanted to meet on my porch, with thick folders between us. He reviewed my notes, Raquel's filings, Mark's audit, and the fire marshal's initial findings. What you have here, Ethan, Agent Miller stated, is a conspiracy to defraud, misuse of public safety funds, and potential environmental endangerment. If that fire break had failed during a red flag warning, everyone in this valley would have been trapped. I nodded grimly. They gambled with fire season to cover their own theft. We're convening a grand jury, he said. We'll need your testimony. I'll be there. The next 3 weeks were a blur. Subpoenas flew. Brenda and 2 former board members were arrested again, this time without polite interviews. Their homes were searched, files seized. The P.O. box Mark found contained dozens of return checks, marked undeliverable, all traced back to HOA due. The local news exploded. HOA fraud scandal exposes fire break lie, endangers dozens. I tried to avoid the spotlight. My job wasn't to gloat, it was to ensure justice and a future for the neighborhood. One evening, patching the old shed, where the orange paint stubbornly remained, a knock came from the gate. It was Bill in his old Forestry Service hat, clipboard in hand. We had a meeting, he said. A bunch of us. We want a fresh start. No more fake fines, no more threats, no more pretending a garden bench violates some secret code, just a volunteer community board. No dues unless everyone votes. I dusted off my hands. And you want my blessing? We want your help keeping it honest. You own the land. We figure if we're doing this right, it should be with the guy who stood up to them. I looked past him at the hills, green shoots of spring pushing through, then back at Bill. You get me bylaws that protect every resident equally, no loopholes, no president nonsense, and you've got a landlord who will back you. He grinned. Already working on it. Over the next month, Ridgewood Pines transformed. The intimidating signs came down. The compliance office became a free tool library. The fake garden, once a monument to HOA vanity, blossomed into a real one, planted and maintained by residents, free from violations and board politics. People started talking again. Firewood was shared, fences mended. A neighbor, Doreen, organized a trail cleanup, and for the first time, no one asked for permission or charged a fee for the brush chipper. At the grand jury hearing, I testified second, after the fire marshal. I laid out the timeline, documents, threats, fake fines, the trail of fraud from a clipboard tyrant to a felony investigation. The jury handed down 6 indictments: wire fraud, falsifying public safety records, misuse of HOA funds, conspiracy to commit fraud, criminal trespass, and negligent endangerment. Brenda pled guilty to 3 to avoid trial, banned from leadership for life. Her husband, handling the fake contracts, faces state prison. The HOA was formally dissolved, its accounts liquidated, illegally collected funds returned to residents with interest, thanks to Raquel's civil suit. I took nothing. Instead, I asked the court to transfer remaining funds to a resident-managed community improvement trust. This trust finally cleared the firebreak properly, with permits and county oversight, and a crew of volunteers, some of the very neighbors who once feared losing their homes over mailbox paint colors. One afternoon, watching the last of the clearing work, a young couple with their toddler walked by. They'd moved into a cabin previously owned by a board member, now on probation. "Is this the trail that used to be off limits?" the man asked. "Was," I said. "Now it's open and..." He looked around, heard a lot of weird stories about this place. I smiled. "They're not stories, they're warnings." As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows, I locked the gate for the night. A new sign hung there now, not one of threats or enforced silence. It simply read, "Welcome to Ridgewood Pines. Respect the land, respect your neighbors. Nobody's above the rules." And for the first time in a long time, that was truly beautifully true.